I want to talk about layers in Rhino. Layers in Rhino are very important because they provide a means for us to organize the diverse elements of our models into a logical hierarchy. And this becomes very important, especially as we consider preparing files for digital fabrication processes. Here we have before us a model that's based on a model of the head, and we're going to be using it to create a sculpture that is composed of horizontal and vertical interlocking serial planes. Okay, but today we're going to use this as a means of exploring how layers can be used within Rhino to organize our model into a logical hierarchy. First, we'll bring up the Layers palette by clicking on the pie icon in the main toolbar, and that brings up our Layers palette. We can right-click on that same icon and close our Layers palette. And once again, opening it, we can also close it by clicking on the red box over here in the corner. That will also close the Layers palette for us. Well, let's look at the Layers palette for a moment here. You'll note that the Layers palette has a name, and under the name is our default layer, and then a series of layers with named layer and assigned a number. You'll note that against each layer there are three icons. The first one deals with visibility, the second deals with whether or not it's locked or unlocked, and then there's the third, which deals with the color. Anytime you have an active layer, it is going to be visible. Okay, it automatically makes it visible. We can change the color of the current layer by clicking on the color icon, the box there, and assigning that layer a new color. And you'll note that now my model turns to magenta, which was the color. I'm going to change that back to black for right now, and click OK, and that's black. Now note, this is the active layer. I could make the next layer the active layer, okay, and in this case I could then right click on it, and I could set this as the current layer. Okay. Secondly, I could click on my default layer and say select all, and it selects select objects is what I wanted to do in this case, and it selects all of the objects that reside upon that layer. Okay, and it makes those active, and it leaves everything else alone. And I can move down to this next layer, which is green, and right click and change the object layer, and it takes everything that's selected and it moves it down to that next layer, and we note that it's changed us back to green. I'm going to move this back here by making this my default layer, my active layer, and I'm going to right click on that. First I have to make my object active. I select my mesh, and then I'm going to change the object layer and get that back to black. It makes it a little bit easier to look at for our demo. Now, right now, having this named default layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, layer 5 doesn't make a lot of sense. We note that our mesh resides on that first layer, so let's double click on that, and we're going to rename this mesh. That's our mesh layer in our model. And you click, and now that name becomes mesh. I'm going to click down on this layer right here, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually come in and proceed to turn off all the other layers. And I sort of know that there's nothing really on this layer right here, but it allows me to access all the elements of on my other layers. Now, one of the things that you can do is that you can lock an element on a layer. So in this case, I lock down my mesh, which means I can't access it in any way within Rhino. I'm going to turn on layer 2, which are my vertical cross sections. Okay, my vertical cross sections, and so my vertical curves. I'm sorry, and we're going to entitle this curve underscore vertical, and give that a name. You'll note that if I drag my selection marquee around the object, it only selects the curves because, as we did earlier, our mesh is on lock, so that can't be accessed. If I unlock it now and do the same operation, you'll note that it selects both elements, become yellow and active. And I want to turn it off. Okay, and I'm going to come down here. I'm going to turn this off right now, and I'm going to click on this element, and you'll note that those are actually surfaces. If I were to turn this off, those are my vertical surfaces. So I'm going to come over here, double click there, and call this surf underscore vert to name that vertical surfaces. And those are my vertical surfaces. If I wanted to, I could go in here and change the color of those surfaces to another color. In this case, I could make them turquoise if I wanted to, and I can change them back to the orange that they were. Okay, and now I'll go in and I'll turn those off, and then I'll come over here. There's nothing active, right? I'll turn on my lights here, and I have my horizontal surfaces. So I'll double click here, give this name, and call this surf underscore HOR for horizontal. Okay, and likewise come down here and turn these off, and then I'll have my horizontal curves, and I'll name those likewise curve horizontal. Now all my layers have logical names that correspond to the elements that they are within my model. If I wanted to look at my curves, I could just look at my curves by turning those layers on. I can make my null layer. Null layer is a layer with nothing on it. If I wanted to look at my surfaces, I could look at my surfaces and see how they interact, which allow me to look at my model there. And if I and now what I want to do is I look at the names. I have my vertical curves, my surface verticals, my surface is horizontal, my curves horizontal. Perhaps I want to put the curves together and the surfaces together. So what I could do, I could click on this curve which is at the bottom of the hierarchy, and I could use my up arrow to move that up. Okay, so that now the curves are together and the surfaces are together in a logical manner. Okay, I can come back now and turn on my head so that I could see all the elements that are working together and that they're organized logically now in a way that makes sense. And the last piece of business that I'd have, I can come over here to this layer. Since I know that there's nothing that resides on it, I can now right click on that and delete that layer from my hierarchy because it's not being used. And one last little note, you can create a new layer by clicking on your icon here, and that creates a new layer here. And you can also take your current layer and create a sub-layer to that layer by clicking on the dual page icon, so that which will allow you to nest your layers into logical elements if you choose that. I'm going to come back up here and I can delete that layer, and you notice that it deletes everything that's nested below it. Okay, and so you want to be aware and cognizant of that as you're working. But now my model is organized in a logical hierarchy. It's color-coded. One thing that you might want to do if we were to turn off our surfaces, one of the things that we know when we're doing laser cutting operations, that generally the cut colors are blue that we use, and also we could color this layer right here. I might want to turn that to magenta because that's my other cut color, so that I know that these will be cut, magenta being an exterior cut and blue being an interior cut. And I can come down here, make this layer current, and look at how my curves relate to one another. But now my model is organized in a logical manner, and it's ready to be set up for a laser cutting process. But that's why layers are so important. That's why you want to make sure that you organize them in a coherent manner, because it allows you to access elements of your models that reside on layers.